Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Landis, I want to talk about Ryan Day without talking about what's going to happen if Ohio State loses to Michigan. Is that okay?
You can try. Yeah. Well, here, sure you can. Yes, you can. You control.
It's our show.
The conversation here. Yeah.
We can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
I went on a radio show that I really enjoy, and this is just the way of the world. I'm not calling them out. It's representative. And every question was about what if Ryan Day loses to Michigan. So I think before camp starts, and as Ohio State fans know, you guys watching and listening right here on Kings of Columbus, first of all, thanks for being here. Practice starts Thursday. Is that right, Bill? Thursday
morning. Yep.
So this is sort of our last chance to squeeze in a theoretical big picture discussion about the coach before it's time to talk ball, right?
That's right. My favorite time of the year, ball talk.
Your favorite time of the year. My favorite time of the year is theoretical big picture discussion time of the year. You're like, can we just talk about plays? And I'm like, you know more what happened in that play than I did. So theoretical. But I think people want to do this. And I think we need to do this. And there's a difference between talking about what if a negative, because I have yet to have anyone ask me, what if Ohio State beats Michigan and has an awesome year? What does that mean for Ryan Day?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because everybody knows what that means for Ryan Day. Be like, all right, everything's good. So it's odd. I'm not against hypothetical discussions about the future, but currently, as it relates to the head coach of Ohio State, it's only a negative discussion. It's like if I was going to go out and get a chainsaw and try to saw a branch off a tree in my yard, and all my wife wanted to talk about was, what if you cut your foot off? What if you cut your foot off? Would be a completely reasonable discussion. But nobody wants to discuss, what if you successfully cut off that branch? Because that's not as interesting. So I think it is important to talk about the Ohio State head coach, but I think it is just as important to have that discussion without putting a veil of 4 straight losses to me. We know they've lost 3 straight. We can talk about that. What is, but I'm not interested right now about what if, because it wouldn't be good. We know that. So that's what we're
of course,
do.
Yeah. I think the answers to both questions are actually kind of obvious, and that's not really all that interesting. What if he does? What if he doesn't? You know the answer.
Yeah.
So why traffic in it? Let's talk about something else.
So how do Ohio State fans feel about Ryan Day right now? And how do you feel about him? And how do I feel about him? That's what we're doing on this show. Won't that be fun? It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Ball.
We love feelings.
That's ball. Feelings. That's feelings. That's feelings, but it's feelings created by ball. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions, survey. What great answers. We have a lot of texter responses. I asked for brevity, and they were smart and brief and thoughtful, and I didn't have to read sometimes they're so thoughtful, it's paragraphs and paragraphs, but I want to run through a bunch of people. These are like, what we did. What do you think Ryan Day does best? And where do you think he can improve the most? Bang, bang, bang. Great discussion. We'll get to that in a little bit. But I also did a survey. And if you want to be able to participate in this stuff, you guys know this by now, right? Like, we have this tech subscriber service, and you can join it. And what a great time to join it if you've maybe taken a break and you want to come back. If you've never tried it before, but you're geared up for this season, practice starts on Thursday. And Bill, we're all going to be out there Thursday and Friday with our eyeballs, right?
Yeah, actually 3 times in the next weekish. So Thursday, Friday, and then again on August 8th, which I believe is next Thursday. So 3 times in the next, 8 days. Yeah.
So, and if someone's going to send you info about what they're seeing and what they think about it, who would you want more than Bill Landis? For real.
Just prepare yourself for a lot of offensive line talk. But yeah. You'll get it. Yeah, you'll get it. Yeah.
For real. Who else would you want? 614-662-4509. Send a text there. You can sign up. All right. So the people who already subscribe, I asked them this question, Bill. How true is this statement to you? I am glad Ryan Day is the Ohio State head coach. And I gave them a rating scale of 1 to 10. 1 means I totally disagree with that statement. 10 means I totally agree with that statement. Guess what? 8.77. 8.77. I'm glad he is our head coach. What do you think of that number?
I'm actually surprised that it's that high. If you would have asked me to guess, I would have guessed like a low 7. This is almost a 9. It's very interesting to me because we have what I believe is a pretty good cross section of Ohio State fans, right? It's not a small group of people who subscribe to our text or reply to the surveys. I think if you were to see the reactions like during games and stuff, you would find, the entire spectrum of like measured reactions to someone who wants to I don't know, go punch a wall or bang their head against the wall. So and that's okay. Don't hurt yourself though. But I do, because we have such a good cross section. I would have expected that number to be lower, because I don't know, like when I'm like out in the world, and I guess by that I mean like mostly looking on Twitter, that I feel
point of information: Twitter is not the world.
Yeah, I know, but that does seem to that right or wrong, probably wrong, frames my point of view sometimes when it comes to Ohio State fans and their reaction to Ryan Day. So based on that, I would have guessed lower. This is a rather strong endorsement of a guy who has not led this program to accomplishing any of its goals in the last 3 years.
I think fans, and our answers bear this out, really like him personally.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to not have a national championship, not have won the Big Ten in the last 3 years, and be on a 3-game losing streak against Michigan and be at an 8.77, that is a lot of goodwill, right?
Yeah.
That if they thought, which is one of those things, right? Like Nebraska fired Bo Pelini for going 9-3, but it was a grumpy 9-3. And there are ways like this is, being a real person, I wouldn't know, has its benefits, right? You get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. But I also agree with you. This is our we don't have trolls on the text. So this is not Ohio. These are not trolls. These are not doom and gloom. I hated my 11-win season kind of people, but they're not Pollyanna. They're not naive. They're not, they tried hard. It's fine. I don't, that's not who our texters are.
Right.
So I think this is representative. And I agree that 8.77 is like really good news for Ryan Day. It's also an off-season number.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. And it's a really good vibes off-season number too.
Did Ohio State how would you, we could, if the season doesn't go well, we can backtrack and do this later. Ranking the greatest off seasons in college football history. This is up there with as many guys as they have calling back, the way they've gotten NIL in order, and the coaching decisions they made.
It's pretty good.
Killed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They killed it. So 8.77, that's a good thing. I also asked, and this is a caveat, the only other options I gave were current college head coaches, because I didn't want to be like out in the world of like, oh, I wish our Ohio State head coach was Mike Tomlin. Like that's not an option. I'm talking about guys who are current college head coaches. Who would you pick to be the head coach of Ohio State among current college head coaches if you could magically choose the coach right now? Ryan Day won. What percent do you think he got?
I mean, with a score this high, I would imagine it was close to 70 or 80%.
Yeah. I actually thought it would be higher. So there are people, to be clear here, who voted, I love Ryan Day being our head coach, but I would trade him for Kirby Smart. We have those voters in our poll because Ryan Day got 65%, which is good. Mm-hmm. Given the 8.77, I thought it might be above 80 because there's no Nick Saban. Like you take Saban, and I'm going to talk ad nauseum on here and on Kings of the North about Saban being removed from college football because it changes everything. And if you had to put, I wouldn't even have put Nick Saban in if he had not retired. I was doing it. Like, what's the point? Ryan Day's wife might trade him for Nick Saban, right? Like if you could be right. It's like, look, honey, you could be the offensive coordinator, but like Nick Saban's the greatest college football coach of all time. That's not a mark against you to be traded for Nick Saban, right? But I do think there is not a dominant coach. And I guess I would have put Harbaugh in this just to see who would have voted. Like people would have been turning out. They'd be like, I'm quitting the text because you asked me if I want Jim Harbaugh to be the head coach of Ohio State. And my answer is definitely no, you jerk, but a little bit yes. And that would make people look themselves in the mirror and question their Ohio State fandom, but also the guy got it done and is a 15-0 national champion. So it's 65% Ryan Day, 17% Kirby Smart, 7% Dan Lanning. I was curious how much support he would get because I feel like people are getting a vibe for Dan Lanning now that he's in the Big Ten. 3% Luke Fickell, 3% other, 2% Kyle Whittingham, who we like, 1% Kalen DeBoer and Dabo Swinney. I'm going to find the Dabo Swinney voters. That cannot be a real vote.
You just said we don't have trolls, and someone voted for Dabo.
He's still a weasel, and also he's no longer good. Like, what are you voting for? Fine.
So did you?
He's a sports weasel, not a real person.
Well, he might be. I don't ask this to derail the conversation, but you did only current college coaches.
Yeah, because I wanted to keep it. I wanted to keep it in a framework, but so tell me why you asked that question.
Because Mike Vrabel's name wasn't on the list.
Okay. So people voted other and put in Mike Vrabel, even though he's not a current college head coach. Yeah. And texters responded and said, why didn't you let us vote Mike Vrabel? And I responded by saying this: if Ryan Day is not the head coach of Ohio State next year, and I'm not predicting anything about that, I'm starting from there. Okay, you're telling me he's not. My money's on Mike Vrabel.
Mine would also be, yeah.
Partly because he's unemployed,
right? He's available, yeah,
and partly because I think
although I guess he
get him the job, and he's a very good coach.
Yeah, and I guess he, like, in this hypothetical situation with the NFL cycle being what it is, he would probably be available until like the end of January anyway, right? So,
and also because he would be the anti-Day. You go from offense to defense. You go from outsider to ultimate insider as an Ohio kid who played at Ohio State. Like, it's all those things. Yeah. And he's available, and he's been incredibly successful. And when he left Ohio State the first time around, his agent told me, like, he either was to be an NFL head coach or the head coach at Ohio State. It's like, okay, well, he's been one, hasn't been the other yet. Yeah. So but again, like, what is like that conversation is nothing except a little interesting sidelight, right? So but you have to start with, okay, you're telling me it didn't happen. Ryan Day decided to be a forest ranger and just left.
Yeah. I mean, it's made, I think, significantly more interesting by the fact that Vrabel is just like there. Like the speculation about it, or the what do they call it? Wish casting about it. While he was a current NFL head coach, it was like, whatever. Like, he's not going to leave an NFL head coaching job to come coach at Ohio State. But now that doesn't matter. So I think the season's going to go fine for Ryan Day. It will be a conversation we're not going to have at the end of the year, but it's there. It's as there as it's ever been because Mike Vrabel's available.
And also, he took like a part-time job racing Jameis Winston in practice at Browns camp.
Right.
He's not only here, like, floating in the ether that he's available. He's literally like, he's right there. He could, if he wanted to. He seems to be in very good shape. He could walk to Columbus from his house if he wanted to.
I bet he could. Yeah.
That's a conversation. But I think 2/3 of Ohio State fans looking at the current college landscape and not saying, I wish we had that guy. I wish we had that guy. I'd take that guy. I think that's a good sign for Ryan Day. And I also think it's reflective of the fact that, like, the landscape's a little uncertain right now. Like, you would trade Ryan Day for Steve Sarkisian? Like, what makes you think you would? Guess who got no votes? Lincoln Riley. My God, Lincoln
That's
Riley
fascinating.
Is falling off a cliff.
Yeah.
Again, it's it's a philosophy that I think a lot of people get trapped in, which is constantly comparing yourself to the best as the best changes. So you're changing, but you have a standard that it is almost impossible for a single person or entity to hold itself to at all times. But various people or entities can reach that standard. But then you point at the standard and say, look, that's better than me. He's better than me. She's better than me. But that person or entity is constantly changing. And so you are constantly falling short, even though you might be individually head-to-head better than that person 9 times out of 10. But the one time they were better, you noticed. And as soon as they fell off and someone replaced them, you didn't notice anymore. Yeah. So we went from a place where we talked about Lincoln Riley versus Ryan Day all the time. And now people want to talk about, does Ryan Day have to beat Michigan? Lincoln Riley fell off a cliff. 0 people, 300 plus votes. 0 people want Lincoln Riley instead of Ryan Day when that was a thing. Now it's nothing, but now it's like, is he Kirby Smart? Is he Dan Lanning? It's like, okay, well, just be careful. But I think it's a nod to Ryan Day. 2/3. It's really good. People want you, but it's also, who are you sure about? And by the way, the guy you're sure about can't keep his players from breaking the law.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you if you thought, because there's like, if more off-field stuff wasn't so fresh in people's minds at Georgia, do you think Kirby would have been higher than 17%?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah,
I think so too. And then the last thing that I want to talk about here was Ryan Day. Do you think Ryan Day is getting better as a head coach, getting worse, or staying the same? Getting better won. What do you think it got? What percent of the vote?
So it was split 3 ways. I would say getting better was like, I don't know, 55%.
80% getting better, 18% staying the same, 2% getting worse. This again is an off-season poll there, and we'll get to it in some of the answers. A lot of the questions, or at least some of the questions that people had about Ryan Day, they feel like he answered them this offseason as it relates to being able to let go and find someone to call plays, as it relates to hiring practices, right? And maybe not just hiring the guy down the hall and making tough decisions about that. There's a couple things that he did that I think encourage people. And I would vote this because I think those two things in particular are very strong signs of a maturing coach. So I'm down with that thought process. What do you think about that thought process? Do you think he's actually getting better?
I would agree with that thought process. I think the interesting part of it to me, or the part of it, it's a little difficult to wrap my mind around, is he made these difficult decisions, but now he's also putting himself kind of in a role that he's never been in before, and I don't know what that's going to be like. Like I know what Ryan Day, like as the head coach / offensive coordinator / play caller, is, and a lot of that was very good. Some of it wasn't, and that's why I think he's made those changes. I don't know what Ryan Day CEO looks like exactly during the year. I think thus far the offseason with him in that role has been encouraging, but it's a different animal when the games start. And that little bit of uncertainty does like not make me, I guess, pulls me back from being like 100%. Yes, he's getting better, but I still think that's a fair answer based off what's happened this offseason. I would not say he's gotten worse. I could see an argument for stay the same, but I think getting better is the right choice.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think if you ask Dabo Swinney, if you ask Clemson fans, is it getting worse? Is it staying the same? Is getting worse or better? It'd be like 95% worse.
Yeah,
right? You're not adapting to the new landscape, or you lost your defensive coordinator and things fell apart. You're not There's certainly a lot of coaches who are you can be currently employed and still getting worse at your job. Because when you live somewhere other than the Deep South, as it relates to college football, you can get worse and not instantaneously be fired.
Yeah.
I did a Saturday Down South show podcast on Monday that was supposed to go up Tuesday. I haven't seen it yet. I'm wondering if I was too spicy. Did you
tell the host that he's from Indiana?
Yeah. He had like 4 Cubs posters behind him and was wearing a Chicago shirt. So he wasn't hiding anything. So yeah, he's a Northern host on a Southern show, and we had a debate. I also made a bet with him. We officially, because he knows enough about me. He asked me so you really think Georgia's going to go 9-3 and miss the playoff? And I was like, yes, I do. Yes, I think that. But we arrived at a bet of I'm 10-2 or worse for Georgia in the regular season. He's 11-1 or better for Georgia in the regular season. And the loser has to go on the other person's show and admit they were wrong, which is like nothing to me.
Yeah.
I am the champ of admitting I was wrong. That's how I got here to begin with. But anyway, so look for that on Saturday Down South. If I'm not too spicy, his name's Connor. He's a good guy. Yeah. It was a fun conversation. He's going to come on the show, I think, before the season starts and spice it up as it relates to the South. So anyway, that's where I wanted to get a landscape sort of Ryan Day off the top. And those numbers that we talked about, Bill, are they maybe better? It sounds like they're maybe a little better than you would have anticipated when it comes to fans' view of Ryan Day.
Yeah, I would say significantly better than I would have anticipated, given how the last 3 years have gone, and that's just because like the standard here is very high. And Ohio State expects to achieve its goals, I think, more consistently than it has the last couple of years. So I'm fairly surprised about this. Yeah.
All right, so now we want to get into what Ryan Day does best and where Ryan Day can improve as the fans see it. And so I want to start off the top with what he does best and like a general overview. I tried to synthesize what the texters said, and there were a couple key categories. And by far, like going away, the number one thing that fans like about Ryan Day is the culture. They very much are proud of what Ohio State is as a program. They think he cares about his players and that they have a good culture at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
They also think they do believe in him as an X's and O's guy and like his offensive prep before a game. They believe in that. They're very encouraged by the way the recruiting has continued at a very high level, which I think certainly was, if not a concern, a question for a lot of people after Urban Meyer left. And then someone made the point that I wanted to put on here that's like, and again, I don't know that you would have said this a year ago, but all the changes in the college football world with NIL and the portal, I think Ohio State's in a good spot with that right now. So they like the fact that it seems like Day has adjusted to the modern college football world, which again, this is where this would be a what Dabo does wrong. Like not everybody has adjusted the right way. Mm-hmm. So what do you think of those positives that fans expressed generally when it comes to Ryan Day?
I agree with all of them. I would think those were in the order that they were presented, or you just in random order?
Culture was the biggest thing. And you'll hear that when I read some of the specific things. Culture and like running the program the right way, I think was the overwhelming number one response.
Yeah, which I would agree with. And it would be hard to set the kind of situate the other three, but I do think Ryan Day's open-mindedness toward the ever-changing world of college football is like a huge plus for Ohio State. And he has certainly said some things out loud where he's like expressed worry about where things were going, but I don't think ever allowed Ohio State to like fall behind as things were changing. Like even he doesn't even have to agree with everything that's happening, but his job is to position Ohio State the best it possibly can be in the world that it's in. So, and I think that he's done that. I know the NIL stuff was a little slow going. Honestly, I don't think that had anything to do with Ryan Day. I think that was more like Ohio State as like a university needing to change its posture a little bit. Ryan Day was ready to roll as soon as NIL was ready to roll. The university and the athletic department, I think, we're catching up to him. So, and that seems like it has happened. So I think all four of those points are definitely the strengths that I would point to for Ryan Day. Maybe the only thing I would do, like if I would like parse X's and O's a little bit, I would say maybe more like passing game stuff and like quarterback stuff than I would sort of holistic offense, but that's probably nitpicking.
And there are some people who have that opinion too. I'll be curious to get your comments when we sort of get into where he can improve. Let me run through some comments, and they're quick, but I think they're smart. So under culture, possibly the best culture builder in football. That's from John. That's high praise. He relates to his players from Tommy W. He connects with players and their families. He loves his players, and it shows from Kevin F. Day does a great job lowering the intensity. Urban cranked things to 11 all the time. Players showed fatigue and lost games they shouldn't. I have zero worries about a Purdue or Iowa game with Ryan Day. That's from Jim. Psychological health of his players, encourages competition, embraces the pressure, approachable. That's Austin. Positive mental attitude and drive. It runs through all his best traits: recruiting, relationships with players, leadership, etc. That's Tom in the South. I think Day is a holistic person. I'd love my kid to play for him because I know he will be looking out for his best interests as a person first and player second. Really doing an impressive job as a first-time head coach. That's from Ken. What does Day do best? He is a player's coach. He supports them and cares for them. The players seem to have great loyalty towards him, also from another Ken. Ryan Day treats his players great. He truly cares about them and wants them to be well-rounded and successful in all walks of life. I would want my kid to play for him if winning was not the top priority. That's from Kendall. I had not previously read the end of that sentence before I said that. So that was, but again, that is the dichotomy, I think, of college football and of America. No, but it is like, it is the too nice conversation when you are at the highest level of anything, I find to be a fascinating conversation. Don't you?
I do. Have you seen the film Roadhouse? You're familiar with the movie Roadhouse?
I should have seen it. I understand.
Oh, really?
It's not.
Patrick
I yell at
Swayze,
you.
yeah.
I yell at you for your cultural holes.
I mean, it's not The Godfather, right? It is Roadhouse.
But then they redid it. But Patrick Swayze is a bouncer, and he kicks people in the head, but he has an internal struggle as well. Is that correct? Or I don't know.
Yeah, he's a well-balanced individual. But there's a part in the movie where when he first arrives at the Double Deuce, and I've seen this movie a million times, like one of my favorite movies. He's instructing the bouncers on like how to do their job. And one of the things that he says is be nice until it's time to not be nice.
Oh.
And maybe that's part of the issue with Ohio State.
Yeah. Let's continue. We will have more of this discussion. He creates a culture that players seem to want to be a part of. Example being the amount of NFL players that came back for one more year. That's Aaron in Chicago. Day's greatest strength is being a champion of culture. Day has created a strong, compelling, and attractive culture at Ohio State where elite players can visualize themselves growing and developing into NFL caliber players. That's Brian. What Ryan Day does best as a head coach, recruiting in my mind, good relationship builder with players and staff. That's Paul. His care for the players separates him from other coaches in recruiting and the players' love for him. He is the modern football coach, Jordan. I thought that was a very interesting way to put that. Day, what he does best, culture and the standard. He seeks excellence. That's John. All right, that's the culture conversation, which I think is related to, but not the exact same thing as running a program the right way, which people also commented on. Ryan Day is a good man who I truly believe does the right things and represents the university and team I care about very well. In a business that's tough to have morals, I think he does. He's someone that kids want to play for and families seem comfortable sending their kids to him. That's Alex. Culture of good people. They don't get into trouble. That's Dan. Day makes the program look good. Has there been a single scandal under him? The answer is no. He seems like a great person and it reflects positively on the university. Daniel, Day is great at being a face of a program that genuinely cares about student athletes, and he seems like a guy you'd want to play for and send your son to play for. That's Ian. So building a good culture of winning, like, hey, this is a culture players want to play here, I think is related to, but not the same thing as like, it makes me proud of my football team and my university because there's not a million things going wrong, which is where Kirby Smart would not get those responses from his fans. Now, maybe they wouldn't care, but right now, Kirby Smart would not win the Running It the Right Way award at Georgia. It's just a fact. There are times when Urban Meyer, especially at Florida, much more so than Ohio State, would not have won the Winning the Right Way, Running a Program the Right Way award. There are times when Tress might not have won the Running the Program the Right Way award. And so we're going to have a deeper discussion about that. But like when you hear, what do you think of that example? Because again, it was more culture, but there is some doing it the right way that at least some fans still care about.
I think a lot of fans actually care about it. I think it's just like you don't want like secondhand embarrassment on behalf of your program. On the field stuff is one thing. And like, I understand like you can be embarrassed by on field performance and people will rib you and stuff like that. But you like when your program or the players you root for, or your coaches that you cheer for, like are out in the world, you want to, or you hope, I guess, that like they represent the thing that you love, the way that you hope you would yourself, right? If you had the opportunity to. So like, I get that being very important. And I actually think like even at places like Georgia, where maybe you might find a larger percentage of people who might overlook what's happening there. There are still people you see it who are I think are kind of fed up with what's happening off the field at Georgia. So I'm not surprised that what Ryan Day has done here in that regard has resonated with people, because I also agree that it's pretty important.
As college football, college sports professionalize, and as the transfer portal continues to move players in and out, which I just think naturally leads to connections for fans and players that maybe aren't quite as deep, as opposed to, we talked to Cam Fabiculanen at Washington. We talked to him at Big Ten Media Days on KOTN. he's been committed. It's been 6.5 years since he committed to Washington, and he stayed through 5 head coaches, right? Yeah. When you have guys like that guy's a Husky for life. When you have Denzel Burke and Jack Sawyer and Travion Henderson and Emeka Egbuka and JT Tuimoloau and all these guys, Cody Simon, who have been Buckeyes forever, right? That connection is there. But as we move forward in this, I wonder in the NIL portal world if fans will care less about doing things the right way, because I don't know if do professional fans care about doing things the right way. It's certainly like from a holistic standpoint, I don't think that exists. Individually, you might be like, I think that good player on my team is a terrible person. I don't know what to do about that. But nobody asks if the Dallas Cowboys are running things the right way, right? I mean, we almost celebrate the outlaw nature of some professional sports teams at times. So do you think that will begin to fade in college sports? Will this, if someone listens back to this in 10 years, will it be like listening to a podcast from the 50s? I mean, you go back and listen to podcasts from the 50s all the time. They sound old.
I do. They do sound old. Probably. Especially because I think still at this point, while like NIL is like a little hard to define and not necessarily pay for play, like if we're being honest, in some respects it is, but in others it's not. I think people probably still view it how they viewed it 30 years ago in terms of being separate from a professional enterprise. But once revenue sharing kicks in, and it just feels, I mean, college football is already big business, but I think it'll like tangibly feel more like that once revenue sharing happens. I do think you can see that sentiment start to change a little bit.
I think Florida coach Billy Napier had some quote that something about like, I think good people make for good players or whatever. And I think some people read it as a shot at Georgia, but other people were like, why don't you get to the playoff and until then shut your hole? Yeah. Because right. Sometimes that's what I always say, you know, who talks about GPA the most? Coaches with losing records. Yeah. So when you are winning, then I think generally people appreciate the fact that you're doing it the right way. If you are doing it the right way while getting your butt kicked on the field, I think people are like, could we get some guys in here who know how to play football and maybe aren't making the honor roll? What are we doing? This is ridiculous.
Right.
But what has happened? I mean, they're winning 11 games a year. And to the point of one of the texters, like, has there been a peep of anything? I mean, we're always like, I got very trained, and I wasn't even here for some of the stuff, you know, early in the Tressel era, but like I got very trained for like, you never, like at any moment, an off-field thing could drop. You do not know. It could be, and you know, everybody, Ohio State's been through enough, and I wonder that about Ohio State. Ohio State fans want to win at the highest level, but they've also been through more than their fair share of off-field issues in the last 20 years. And so I wonder if they appreciate that to even a higher degree, because I think there have been times when Ohio State's been a very successful football program, but yet off-field issues have made some Ohio State fans, I don't want to say embarrassed, but maybe reluctant to like wear their stuff because they're just going to get crap from people about like, oh, you guys are a bunch of cheaters or whatever. I'm like, no matter how much you're winning, that's not that fun to have you wear a block O out in the world and people just think you're a bunch of rule breakers.
Yeah. Or a bulldog now out in the world when people think that.
Yeah. Which is why we talk about it. Because nobody else. All right. Other things that Ryan Day does well. Recruiting and offensive game planning. That's from Clayton. I do believe Day is an elite X's and O's guy. If you watch the All-22 of the Michigan game, the Ohio State receivers are constantly open, but either Kyle McCord didn't see them or was too hesitant or didn't have time. He prepares an offensive game plan for a big playoff game. Given time, both Clemson playoff games, for instance, or the Georgia game, like he gets it done. That's from Tony. Day prepares his teams better than any coach I've seen at Ohio State with more than 2 weeks of prep time. We may not have won all of the games, but by far the best performances I've seen, i.e. Clemson, Georgia, happened in that circumstance. That's from Austin P. Recruiting. What Day does best? Recruiting, building relationships with players and coaches. That's from Ira. The best thing he does is recruit. Overall, he has not dropped off a bit since Urban left, maybe improved in some areas. One caveat, someone has to be able to recruit offensive line, and that's not happening. What Day does best, he's had a blue chip roster for 5 years. Anything I might say positively about Day, those thoughts are tempered for me by the fact it's hard not to win with the teams he has had. So this is one of the things when like you're the GM and the head coach, it's like, oh, you build the good roster. But then sometimes that just means like, well, why didn't you win with the good roster you built?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Mark Pantoni is the GM, but you are much more responsible for the roster as a head coach in college football than you are as a head coach in the NFL or in the NBA, unless you're one of those super powerful dudes. Last couple things, adapting to the new world, adjusting and adapting to a very dynamic college football environment. He has faced an environment that Tress and Urban never faced and largely made the program even better. That's from Matt. He seems to adapt when issues arise. And now I think there's an urgency of self-preservation that's part of that. That's from Rick. And a couple other things. But like those are the overall thoughts. Just before we get to some of the things where he can improve, what are your thoughts on sort of the game planning aspect? You said you think maybe it's more related to the pass game, but like, do you, especially the point some people made about like, give them a couple weeks and what they did, what they got when they got ready for Clemson in 19 and 20, and when they got ready for Georgia in 22. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It also makes me very curious about his ability to do that in a 12-team playoff world where you're not going to have a month off before your first playoff game, right? Like, and you probably don't need that long. Like Ryan Day with an extra week to prepare is probably enough. He's incredibly detailed and organized when it comes to game planning. You pick up on some of that if you ever go to the coaches clinics and he speaks, and which he didn't do for a couple of years, but he did speak again this year in like a more informal setting. And it was just like a reminder of like, he's still the guy that got the job in 2017, who just like kind of doesn't leave any stone unturned when it comes to like being prepared for something. So I think all that's right. I think there'll be some adjustments now in the new world, but it's definitely been a strength of his to this point. My only, I don't know, concern, I guess, with some of that is just like there have definitely been times where it just seems like he's kind of let the run game kind of fall to the wayside. And I don't know if that is hyper focus on what they're doing passing because he's very good at it. I might argue he's maybe the best passing game coordinator in college football, or at least has been. But the run game has not matched that for too long. And now I think they're addressing that with Chip. So like that goes back to the original or the start of the conversation about him making some moves this offseason that you find encouraging. But it's always odd. It's always a little odd for me to like give somebody credit for making a good decision when they've like made a bad decision 3 or 4 years in a row leading up to it. Like it almost became too much. Yeah, it became like too much to bear. So like, oh, I guess I got to do something when it's like, you should have done something 3 years ago. But I guess now that it's done, they'll be better for it. Yeah.
That's one of my least favorite things in life. People seem to love to celebrate. And I get people deserve second chances. And I'm not saying like individually you don't deserve the second chance, but I don't like celebrating someone who made a colossal mistake and then came back from it. And then like the person who's done the right thing every moment of their lives from age 1 to age 80, they're over on the side like, I'm good too. I never did anything wrong.
Yeah.
People love a comeback story. They don't necessarily love like the doing it right from the get-go story.
But isn't there like a decent amount of that with Ryan Day? Like putting Corey Dennis in the position that he did and leaving him there for too long, hiring Parker Fleming initially and leaving him there for too long.
You're right.
Probably not making tough decisions relative to Larry Johnson. There's a lot of stuff. It's all staff stuff, but like I think there's a lot of that with him. I think he's got a pretty good staff now, but there were some pretty significant mistakes made along the way to get here that I think have cost Ohio State championships.
No, I agree with that. Yeah. So, but so we're talking about it now. We're talking about like Ryan Day making the tough decisions. But if he had just like hired great people from the get-go, it'd be like, oh, their staff's good. And we wouldn't talk about it as much. Instead, it's like, oh, he got rid of Parker Fleming. I mean, you think back again, they turned Corey Dennis and Parker Fleming into Chip Kelly and James Laurinaitis. It blows your mind, but it's sort of like that was there. That was there for 3 years. You could have always done that, right? And the Jeff Hafley leaving was a tough blow, but man, you probably could have maybe you could have hired an experienced defensive coordinator there instead of hiring like an excellent position coach that you knew who had never been a coordinator before.
Yeah.
So
and like I don't remember exactly what I said at the time. I'm sure at the time I was like, oh, this is an interesting hire. Like I like bringing Kerry Combs back. But then after a year, it was pretty clear like that was not the right decision. And then it dragged on for another year.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I mean, he carries that. He needs to carry that. But then it does allow you the opportunity, like you flip it. It's like James Laurinaitis is here.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about where Ryan Day can improve. Generally speaking, the overall themes, as I tried to sort of wade through the awesome answers from our tech subscribers, were trusting other coaches, which is a little bit of like letting this go. It's a lot of related to play calling, right? Like just you've got to believe in your other guys. The number one thing was game day decisions, particularly aggression. And like that sort of in the moment, there were even people who were like, I believe in his game planning going in, but I have questions about like the execution on game day, especially as it relates to aggression and if a thing needs to change at all. Questions about like motivation and psychology for big games in particular. Like, is he doing the things to get his players to perform at their best and to get himself to perform at his best? And then related to that, it's just like, this goes back to the thing we're talking about. Like, is he a killer? Is he a cold-blooded, ruthless, step on your neck, let's go kind of guy? Which, again, not that this is a new conversation, but I think there are people who are like, I would take Ryan Day 364 days out of the year and give me Urban on the Michigan game.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of what some people want him to be. What did you think of that general overall list? Again, knowing sort of that the game day decision-making and aggression was the most popular thing.
Yeah, no, again, I think our texters nailed it. Those are the things that I would put up there. And it's I think we talked about this when we talked about it must have been after last year's Michigan loss or around that time, about the methodology that kind of gets you through the rest of the season without hitting those speed bumps that were mentioned before, and then trying to ratchet it up for that Michigan game. I do think that's difficult. And it's not that like Urban wasn't a 10 out of 10 week after week. Maybe he was a 10 out of 10 every week. And then for Michigan, he was like a 20 out of 20. But I do think there's something to that, because maybe a counter to that would be like, well, they play well against, Georgia and Clemson. It's like they have a month to get into that mindset. When you have a week to try to approach a game differently from sort of the even keeled way you approach every other game that allows you to be successful, allows you to avoid the games you're not supposed to lose, the losses you're not supposed to take. I think that's challenging. I think that's the thing that Ryan Day probably has to figure out, on top of a lot of the in-game stuff, which I think will probably be handled better now that he has someone calling the plays who he can trust, and he's not worrying about the clock, and he's not trying to pick up on the vibes of his team at the same time and trying to do math in his head about like, if I do this, how much time do they have with the ball, and like all that kind of stuff. I think he can kind of lean more into like the vibes of things and the feelings of things, and let Chip Kelly worry about what the proper play call is in that particular situation. So I think that the offseason staff changes have addressed that point. Like, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that it's reasonable or possible that will be the case. But I do still wonder about the other stuff. Like, he is the motivator of the team, and clearly has not gotten his team into the proper frame of mind for the Michigan game. So no matter what is on his plate in terms of day-to-day, week-to-week kind of job responsibility, he still has to prove that he can do that thing.
Do you think as it relates to the Michigan game, do you think any motivation, psychological questions around that are more about the Clemson and Georgia games? They had more time to prepare, and Michigan, you turn it in a week? Or is it more that it's Michigan? And like, Michigan's good at football, but also it's the rivalry. And I think it is always a difficult line to walk of, this is the biggest rivalry in college football, maybe the biggest rivalry in North American sport.
Mm-hmm.
But don't freak yourself out to the point where you can't perform at the highest level. So I was saving this. I wish I had turned the phrase like this, the way one of our texters did. So I have to find it. You like, what do you think of that idea? And then there's a quote that I want to find, because I think it was really good. But like, what is it? Because it's Michigan, or because of the timetable?
No, I think it's more about Michigan and what that game signifies. I think part of the struggles too, like, I don't mean to psychoanalyze somebody necessarily, but I guess I am. I wonder if Jim Harbaugh beating Ohio State, and then immediately making it personal with Ryan Day, like caused Ryan Day to take his eye off the ball a little bit, and get maybe distracted by some of the wrong stuff as he was trying to get his team ready for that game, which will be an interesting dynamic now because Jim Harbaugh's not on the other sideline. But I think it's mostly about Michigan. I think the timeline does matter, but it's mostly about like everything that is involved with Ohio State playing Michigan.
And it's one of those things where in the end, it's like, oh, like Jim Tressel got him, or not, Jim Harbaugh got him, right? Oh my God, I just confused Jim Harbaugh and Jim Tressel. But Jim Harbaugh was 0-5.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Harbaugh was 0-5 in the rivalry, and then he won the last 3, and now he's gone. And it's like, well, there was a time when people thought Harbaugh didn't know how to win this game, and then he won. So now he does know how to win it. But I think you make a very good point about the personal side of that. And I think in addition, Jim Harbaugh, the last 3 years, has been a very good head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. I think as it relates to culture and scheme and motivation and hiring and all those things. And then also we know Connor Stallions was there. So like Jim Harbaugh, the proof is on the field. They were very, very successful. But I think as it relates to the Ohio State Michigan game, I think that personal aspect is specific to the game and is specific to the head coaches. And to your point, might be very good for Ryan Day, because Ohio State Michigan is personal. But I think Jim Harbaugh, Ryan Day became personal in a way that was not good for Ryan Day. You're right.
I agree. Yeah.
This is the quote from TF. Ryan Day's biggest question mark is his ability to strike a balance between getting his guys to play with an edge instead of playing on edge. There's a difference. How well said is that?
Yeah. Nailed it. That's exactly right.
TF. That's the kind of thing. That's like put that in a column. I'm stealing that. If I wrote anymore, I'd steal that, drop that straight in.
Ryan Day's going to say that in a press conference this year.
Yeah. From TF. Love it. Okay. Here are the specific text or things about where they think Ryan Day can improve. One other thing that some people brought up was listening to the critics. I think people, and this relates to Harbaugh a little bit, like I think people sometimes think he hears the noise. My biggest question about Day as a head coach is how he allows the national rhetoric to get to him. For example, the toughness comment from a few years ago had him putting pressure on the team about being tough enough to contend. One more example, to me, I feel like he internalized the Harbaugh third base comments from a few years back, and it handicapped him mentally when it mattered most the last 3 seasons. And I think the Lou Holtz comment shows that
clearly.
Like he hears it, and you can hear it and use it, but I do think the question of like him hearing it and acknowledging it, like, is that a good thing? I think it's a very valid question, right? And again, the texter is saying the same thing you just said about Harbaugh, but it's not only Harbaugh.
Yeah, no, I think he definitely hears it. I think that's probably a generational thing. Plus, he's got like young kids who are, I'd imagine, on the internet all the time. Like, it was probably easier for like a Jim Tressel or even a Urban Meyer to like have no idea what was going on in the world around them. And I think Ryan Day, being of a different age, hears it, and I do think it does affect him poorly. I do not think he takes in that information and then channels it properly.
I worry the weight starts to get too heavy. It hasn't yet, but it's going to if they fall short this year on the last Saturday in November, or if they have an early exit in the playoff. I'm not sure if he can recover from that. I hate the or bust conversation, but it really feels like it's now or never with him in charge, right? Again, like I do. Sometimes I think there have been moments when he stood up in front of us in the team room at a news conference, and I felt like you could see the weight on his shoulders. And then there are times when I feel like he walks in and it's like, oh, it lifted. Like something happened. Either they had a good practice or they won a game, or he just like got through it in a conversation with himself or with people that he cares about. But I feel like I can see the different burdens that Ryan Day is carrying and not carrying in a very visible way at times.
Yeah, I think that's because he's like a human. You know what I mean? But a lot of college football coaches aren't. So I don't think he's quite mastered the art of turning into a robot when those things, where he encounters those things, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, you can notice it.
It's playing out in the Olympics right now, right? I mean, humanity is on display in the Olympics. But sometimes, and I don't even know if it's sometimes, it's almost all the time, too much humanity at the highest level does not help you win. The better person you are, the more difficult it can be to execute, because you can either get to that point and be like, you know what, this is really important, but it's just a thing in a great big world, right? And so I'm not, or you can like go the other way and be like, oh my gosh, so many people are relying on it. It's a tough thing. Sometimes if you're maniacal, cold-blooded, single-minded, it's like, I don't want to go out to lunch with that person. But my God, I also would not want to compete against them. Which in the end, I think is the main conversation.
Yeah, that is yeah.
Would you want to go to lunch with me?
Yeah, I've had several lunches with you. They're delightful. Yeah.
We can almost stop now. Like, that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
And then how do you channel that? And if you could, I think it's one of those things. It's a 90-second question that begins with, Ryan, you seem like a human, and ends with, what can you do to perhaps lessen your humanity on game day and allow you to be the cold-blooded killer that maybe would bring out the best in Ohio State in a competition against their hated rival. And you know what? Like, in the end, and again, when you're successful, then it's like, oh, that guy had it right. Jim Harbaugh is different, right?
Not a human.
I actually think, but is it possible, right, that because he relates to his players, I think, in his very specific way.
Yeah.
But then on game day, I also think, like you said, I actually could see like all the weirdness. And like we talked about that again, he's climbing trees and he's taking his shirt off and all those things that he was doing, I think, to serve as a purposeful distraction / he couldn't help himself until they were prepared to truly compete at the highest level, to truly compete with Ohio State. He's doing all those kinds of things, crazy like a fox, right? And then when it gets down to it, it's like, he's like a lovable guy to his players. But then I think you feel like, I think he might kill me. Like on game day, it's like he would kill me if I'm on the other side. He might kill me. And I think he's been incredibly successful. Now he's 0-5 against Ohio State. Can't forget that. And Connor Stallions was on their sideline. So like, you can't forget that.
But doesn't that speak to his killer nature, that he was willing to let something like the Connor Stallion situation happen to gain an edge?
All right, let's do this.
Not that Ryan Day needs to cheat. I'm not advocating for that, but I do think that puts a pretty fine point on it.
Yeah. So let's do this. This is I was going to save it. Day is running the program the right way, the right culture, and bringing in the right kids. If you look at other top programs, they have glaring issues, dog mentality and Stallions. Day has built maybe the most respectable program at the top of college football. But the question is, can you win it all that way? Michigan used to brag about doing things the right way and using it as an excuse for why they lost. It took them cheating to get over the top. Day is now burdened to prove that theory wrong, but I do believe he is the best equipped to do it, and I believe it's just a matter of time. But I think, like, when you think about that, again, Michigan prides itself on being that way, right? We do things the right way. And there are reports this week, right, that there may be a notice of allegations dropping from the NCAA. There are discussions about, could that involve potentially serious penalties? But they won. And is that it? Do you believe that's what it takes? Can you win the nice way? Bill, can you?
Can you win the nice way is a different question in my mind than can you win without somebody illegally scouting your opponents? And the answer to the second question, I think, is yes. So I do think Ohio State could win a national championship without going to those extremes. And like Ohio State, Ryan Day does run a very respectable program. Everyone's trying to find an edge, like, and that includes Ryan Day too. So like where you can find one, I'm sure he has. Yeah, I think you probably can win that way. Yeah, I like they remain very talented. Like, it's not like Ryan Day has operated his program this way and Ohio State has suffered from a talent standpoint because of it. Like, they still get very good players. So as long as that's the case, I do believe that there's a path forward with the way that things have been run here under Ryan Day.
All right, let's talk about game day aggression, where people think he can improve. The ability to build aggressive / complementary game plans that leaves no doubt. That's from Tommy. Game day decisions and aggressiveness, especially aggressiveness, just never seems to have a good feel for the game. That's Clayton. Whether he has the ability to get over the top in the biggest games. Often those come down to one or two plays. Good coach versus great coaches get over the top in those big games more often than they do not. That's Jordan. Biggest problem, game management. John. From Dan, cutting loose includes playing backups more and just letting the offense fly.
Mm-hmm.
Austin, it used to be his play calling in big games. He would get extra conservative to the point where the other team would have an advantage, a self-fulfilling prophecy of worrying about failure to the point that it became true. Giving up play calling to Chip Kelly cures him of that, though. This is John, overthinking play calling and or he doesn't adapt in game. This is Kevin. In-game scheme changes and player rotation. It's his team, not Larry Johnson's or Tony Alford's or Justin Fry's. The Ohio State versus Georgia Ryan Day used to be the Ryan Day we saw against Georgia is for Kevin's point, used to be commonplace. Now it's a one-game flash. He used to be aggressive and less predictable. I suppose handing play calling duties to Chip will eliminate this, but I want to see more aggression on both sides of the ball this season with the team they have. So related to that, before I get your comment on that, is this. People using the phrase being in your own head as it relates to this game day stuff. Rick, getting inside his own head during big games. Chip will help with this. Matt, winning big games. He's won enough to show he's not Cooper, but he has to beat Michigan and more of the playoff games. He's had valid reasons, but he needs to deliver, especially against Michigan. Ken, high pressure game management, especially in the game. He seems to get in his own head the last 2 years. Coach fast and loose, like the Georgia game. Hopefully another year of experience and Chip will help. Tony, timely in-game adjustments when the game plan isn't super effective. This is from the 602. Biggest question about Day is big games. He seems to tighten up. Chip Kelly may be the answer, but I'm not sure. This is John. Day's biggest question the week before the Michigan game in 2021. CJ Stroud threw for close to 600 yards and 6 touchdowns. The following week in Ann Arbor with the score 14-13. Day's first 3 plays to open the second half were running plays that went nowhere. Day out-coaches himself. Biggest question from Paul, will Ryan Day get in his own head? He can psych himself out in preparing for Michigan or trying to win last year's game in the current season. Previously, as a play caller, he could also get in his own head by not sticking with what's working and trying to get to everything on the call sheet. And from Dana, not overthinking or letting the pressure of the game get inside his head. That phrase keeps coming up, getting inside your own head. As it relates to aggression and in the moment of the game, what do you think of those ideas?
I would use the same words to describe how I feel about Ryan Day, Ryan Day's game management, especially in big games. And I think a lot of it is probably a byproduct of juggling all that he had to juggle, which is why I've been an advocate of him giving up play calling. Even though there have been times throughout his career where he's been very good at it. I just think it's a lot to manage. And I think it's been to Ohio State's detriment in the biggest games. When he's kind of lost his sense of I don't know, like sense of urgency, like feel for things. I think of moments where I think of like the drive in, I can't remember, it was second half. I can't remember if it was the third or fourth quarter last year against Michigan, where they ran the ball like 8 times, or they ran the ball 8 times on like 11 plays, just like ran it down Michigan's throat in a way that no team had really done all year. And it was a combination of like counter and power and like pin pull plays, all that kind of stuff. Just, it wasn't just spamming outside zone, hoping it'll work. And like they out physicaled Michigan on a drive where it really felt like Ohio State was going to like flip that game. And then I think they came out in the next series and then like ran stretch into the boundary again. And it got shut down and like the offense really didn't do anything the rest of the game. And like that to me spoke to a tremendous lack of feel for what was happening with his offense. And I was actually encouraged by something that they said at Big Ten Media Days about the offense. Like something that is important for the offense this camp is like finding its fastball. And he described it as the thing that you're just going to do and like dare the other team to stop it. And I don't know if he's always had that mindset. And I wonder if being freed up from the guy who has to call the plays and develop that plan, like in a nitty gritty style, might open themselves up to being a little more, I don't know, sensical at times with the way that they're calling plays. Cause just, you'll see 4 or 5 like awesome plays in a row, and then just like a really odd decision where you think to yourself, like, have you been coaching in this game the entire time? Like, and I don't know that I've always felt that about him, but I've definitely felt that about him the last couple of years, especially in the Michigan game. And if the guys who are calling the plays aren't also tasked with like quote unquote managing the game the way that a head coach does, I think that will probably leave Ohio State in a better position to maintain its aggression, to find those the counters that people are looking for within a game, those little adaptations to whatever Michigan in this case is doing to contend against Ohio State. So I agree with all of the criticisms, but I also think this show is like, yes, your criticisms are right. Your criticisms are right. I think things are in place to help Ryan Day avoid those pitfalls this year.
Let me run through a last couple categories, and then I'll chime in on what I think of some of this stuff. Motivation. I don't think Day is an elite motivator. Small sample size, but the audio clips that get released of him speaking to the team just don't seem to have the same command that Urban did. That's from Eric. The ability to psychologically prepare for and peak for the biggest context. Obviously the Michigan game, but I haven't seen it in other games as well. The Oregon loss comes to mind. That's Ron. I think he sometimes isn't ruthless enough until this year, and it prevents him from doing what needs to be done in order to win big, like Urban, Saban, or Kirby. That's from Daniel. He's not as much of a killer as Urban or other old school guys. Totally a trade-off I will take, though. That's Ken. This is like sort of letting things go and letting your coaches do their thing. Can Day really keep his hands off the offense and become the CEO? That's Aaron in Chicago. Can he let go and trust the other coaches? That's Tom in the South. Then related to the run game, I'm curious with you about this. Ryan Day's biggest struggle has been the run game, stopping the run and running the ball in big games. It's scheme, mindset, and execution. Does it need to be practiced more? His judgment, there's some hiring stuff here too now. His judgment and coaching hires, still keeping Justin Fry while he continues to miss badly on the recruiting trail is a red flag. That's Drew. Biggest question, did he promote the best coaches that will allow him to be a head coach and not the OC quarterbacks coach and all that stuff? To finish that thought, it's exciting to think about what influence he would have on the defense if he had time to provide input there. That's from Ira. And then some people they're actually questioning some of his, this was an interesting one. Someone like the idea of his high school quarterback evaluation, given how some things have gone, they were in early on Jack Miller and then they got CJ late, and they picked Kyle McCord over JJ McCarthy. And I'm curious, Aaron, they were in on Raiola, then they went to Aaron Nolan, and then Julian Sayin fell in their lap at the end. You never would have thought that. I thought it was an interesting thing to bring up because I don't want to say the jury's out, but I think you would have thought, oh man, this guy knows QBs. And it's I think there might be some questions there. But generally, right? So I think in the end, I think my overall view of this is the things he does best are foundational, and the things he needs to improve are fixable. And I think he took steps to fix some of the things we're already talking about, which is, and now maybe the thing that is a little more foundational is, do you have it in your personality to psychologically and motivationally prepare a team to play its best in the most important game? Can you get them to play with an edge, not on edge, as the texter so wonderfully put it? That I think might be a little more inherent. But then, as I said to him when we interviewed him at Big Ten Media Days, I feel like he's been through the fire. And I think the scars that he always talks about, the disappointments, the losses, the criticism, I think have improved him in that way. And then everything else that's logistical, basically hiring better coaches and giving up the play calling. But if it was he's hired great coaches and I think he's pretty good at motivation, but his culture blows. That'd be hard.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to fix.
Yeah.
So the good foundational, the questions fixable. Do you agree with that general idea?
I wonder, the only thing I don't know whether it's fixable is the motivational stuff. That's a lot of the on-field criticisms, the in-game decision making, I think some of that is fixable with, and I think he has made the right steps to try to fix that with the staff decisions. But at the end of the day, he is still the guy that has to get the team ready to play its best in the most important games, regardless of whatever other hats he's wearing that week. So that remains a question for me. I don't know if that's fixable or not.
You know who can help fix it? His new best friend, Tress. Get him in. Motivation coach. Last couple of big picture things I saved from some texters, just that I thought encapsulated some thoughts. This is from our guy, Greg C74. I think Day has an it factor. It must be what Gene Smith saw in him. Part of that it is just him, not his offense or philosophy. I guess I just want to see him finally scale the top of the mountain. Like Dabo and Kirby, he has a few years being close with no cigar. Now is the time. This is from our guy, JJ. This offseason did a lot to quell my concerns about Day. He did everything I've been upset with for him not doing. Opened his mind to letting go of some control, delving into the portal for offensive line help, firing unqualified coaches, winning major recruiting battles, brilliant and bold hire to replace Alfred with Lachlan. All of these answered my frustrations or questions that I've had about Day. I'm all the way back in on him. I thought that was interesting from JJ. The biggest question is whether Michigan was cheating, and is that going to come back full circle, or is he John Cooper? Sort of succinctly put from Austin P.
Yeah.
This is from Jacob. I think Ryan is one of the top 3 coaches in the sport with Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart. Kirby cannot seem to keep his program in order with all of the driving incidents. Dan is good, but it's hard to tell how much is him and how much is Nike money covering his flaws. No matter what happens this year, Day needs to stay the head coach at Ohio State. If you combine winning in the field and keeping the program in order, Ohio State is the #1 program in the country, and I'm not sure second is even that close behind. He needs to beat Michigan. But with the cheating, I'm not even sure how much of the last 3 years we can blame him for. If they don't cheat to win in year 1, Harbaugh would have been fired and they would have gone 8-4 last year. That's Jacob. And this is the last one I think is a good point. I think Day is a very good coach who will become a great coach. He had no head coaching experience and he had to learn. I think he is a lot like Tom Osborne at Nebraska. He will get better as he goes. That's from Gary. Tom Osborne had a reputation of like not being able to win the big one. He won a lot. He lost a lot of games, a lot of, national championship kind of games against teams from Florida before he got over the top. And then he won 3 out of 4 national championships and retired. Mm-hmm. But it took a while. And he had not been a head coach because he got promoted from within at Nebraska. I think that idea of, and again, it's one of those things like you can bank on that. And it's like, well, what if you're wrong? And it's like, just all the failures will lead to success. And it's like, actually, it was just a lot of failures and no success. You don't know what the future holds. But I think having a little bit of the perspective of he's never done this before. And there have been guys who got close, and then getting close, gaining experience, helped them eventually get over the top. If I had to pick one right now, is Ryan Day a never gets there guy, or is he the failures of the past help him finally get there in the future? I would pick that. I would pick failures of the past help him get there, because I don't think motivation questions notwithstanding, I don't think there's anything foundational about him that's like, he's not it. I don't think, and I don't think that's where our texters are either. I don't think people believe like, he's not it. And then the Michigan Stallions thing throws a little bit of a wrench into it. Yeah. And as I told him, it feels like you are prepared to be the best head coach you've ever been because of some of the moves you made and also for the experience of losing in a way that really hurt you and I think changed him for the better.
I think I'm with you on all that. Like I would agree that if given the choice between the two futures for Ryan Day, I think he is a guy that does get over the top, that does get Ohio State to winning a national championship. And it's funny to me. This is like a tangent, I guess, but to describe Ryan Day as having gone through the fire in a room full of coaches that would have killed to go through that fire.
Oh yeah, very pleasant fire.
It's like unique
high level
Ohio
fire.
State. Yeah, I get it. It's Ohio State. No, I think he is prepared to be the best head coach he's been. I definitely agree with that. Whether or not that is ultimately good enough to get Ohio State to where it wants to go, I think is a fair question. But I think he has, through trial and error, positioned himself to make his best swing at it yet. So we'll see what happens.
Now, with the talent they have and the transformation Michigan just underwent, if we're sitting here after 4 straight losses to Michigan, my mind will have changed.
Sure.
Right? You don't ignore facts. But to sit here right now with all the facts that we have, with all the moves that have been made, and to just want to talk about what if they lose, what if they lose, what if they lose, what if he loses, what if it's 4 in a row, what if it's 4 in a row, I don't think it's the right conversation. Sunday, or actually like middle of the fourth quarter, if it's not going so well, that is the conversation, because 4 in a row with everything they have right now, of course, we're not going to be blind to that. But I just don't think, excuses are not the right word, but when you think about the realities of the losing and the changes that have undergone, I think there's enough things on both sides of those. If they had not changed, if he was like running it back with Corey Dennis, I really think Corey's gonna, and if they were just walking around being like, well, NIL, man, NIL's not fair, it stinks, and but they've tried to get better.
They have tried to get better. And I do like, I also I don't struggle with it, because I think there are enough things that Ohio State has not done well enough in the Michigan game for me to think like they could have won those games anyway. But like Michigan cheating its way to a couple of wins, I think, against Ohio State, like does make the evaluation a little more difficult for me. I don't think there was a play last year. All that stuff came to light a couple of weeks before Ohio State played Michigan. In theory, I don't think Michigan had much of an advantage in that way in the 2023 game, but they probably did in 2021 and 2022. That'll always be kind of impossible to define, I suppose, but it's there enough for me to think like, okay, like if you want a clean slate for that, I don't know that I'll give you a completely clean slate, but I'll like entertain the idea enough to like, okay, show me what you got now. Like, don't lose this one, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. But for all that to be gone at Michigan, for Jim Harbaugh to be gone, for all their talent to be gone, for their strength coach to be gone, for a couple of their assistants to their coordinators to be gone, and then it's like, okay, well now, like we have to evaluate based on that. But that is not at all where we are right now. We have a couple more things to talk about. We have what you're watching, what you eating, what you're thinking. We'll do that ahead on Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, Kings of Columbus. We certainly, if you have not ever taken it in, would direct you to Kings of the North. We're going to be going to 5 days a week on Kings of the North. The week before the season starts, August 26th, will be our first live show. We're going to have like noon live every day on the Kings of the North feed, Monday through Thursday at the very least, and then some kind of post-game show, I think, will be our 5 main shows every week, Bill. But like, we're excited for that. We're geared up for that. And we certainly would hope that our audience here on Kings of Columbus would stop by and see what you think. If it's not for you, that's great.
Yeah.
But, well, it's not great, frankly. If it's not for you, we get it. But we certainly would appreciate dipping a toe in and trying it for 5 minutes and see what you think when we talk about West Virginia, Iowa State, and Notre Dame.
Yeah, definitely. I would say check it out. And also, we're going to try and I think be successful at doing everything we're doing with Kings of the North without like pulling back really on what we've done with Kings of Columbus. Like we're still going to try to find a way to do post-game stuff for Ohio State too. So at times those might be combined ideas depending on, what time Ohio State plays, but we're expanding, but we're not diminishing our Ohio State stuff either. So
absolutely. And Columbus is the capital of Northern football. Ohio State is expected to be the best team in the North. Guess what that means? A lot of Ohio State talk on Kings of the North.
Yeah.
Just because we have Kings of Columbus and the podcast doesn't mean we don't talk about Ohio State. It would be like having a show in the South and not talking about Alabama. Of course, you talk about them a ton, but you don't only talk about them. So that's the difference. And we just want you to hate the South in football. That's all.
Is that so much to ask? Yeah.
That's so much to ask. I still think I might have been too spicy. I got to look at, I'm too spicy for the South.
Wow. And they like their spice.
They do. What balance do Ohio State fans want? And what balance do they think Ryan Day strikes? This is probably a separate show because it is, I think, interesting. And it again is, I don't think you could have this conversation in the South because they would be like, I don't understand the question. And it was like, well, how do you balance winning and trying to do things the right way? And they would say, what do you mean balance? You mean like winning, like winning is all, like winning, like we want to win, like on a seesaw, like we're balancing while we're winning? What is it? We're log rolling? We're winning. What's the other thing? Anything? It's SEC football. There is no balance. For the fans, how do you balance, quote, running a program the right way versus winning at all costs? And then I said, if you totally value only winning, you're a 10. If you totally value running a program the right way, and that's all you're focused on, you're a 1. The final outcome of that ranking was a 5.62. So, man, it is in the middle. It's like half and half, but it's a lean towards winning. So they're like 56% want to win, 44% 44% want to run a program the right way, right? That's the balance that fans themselves individually, that's what they think. Then I asked the same question of, how do you think Ryan Day runs Ohio State? I'm not asking Ryan Day. I'm asking how you think Ryan Day thinks or how you view him. And that came out 4.96, which is right in the middle, but it is a slightest of leans. It's 49.6% Ryan Day wants to do things the right way, and 50.4%. No, now that you're doing it wrong. Anyway, no, it's 50.4% do it the right way, 49.6% win. So both are right in the middle. Both are right in the 5 range, but the fans are a little more toward winning than they perceive Ryan Day to be. I'm telling you, brother, if you ask this question of Bama fans or Georgia fans or Clemson fans or Florida fans or LSU fans or Texas A&M fans, I cannot imagine them being anywhere other than minimum 8 on winning. And I'm not so sure they wouldn't be at 9.5. The idea that our Ohio State Texters are pretty much in the middle on running the program the right way and winning, and they believe that Ryan Day is too. I think in the end, the proof of this is that fans are pretty much aligned with what they believe their head coach thinks. It's fans want to win 7% more. What do you think of this whole thing? It's a whole show. What do you think of it? I don't think there's anybody in college football that wins at the level that Michigan. I think Michigan would be the same way.
No,
I think their fans
Michigan would be like a 9 or 90% do it the right way.
Yeah. Which, well, you're probably right. And Notre Dame, I'd be curious about. Actually, so I don't think Ohio State stands alone, because the North cares about more than all out, win at all costs. We just do. It's okay. But I think most college football fans would say, well, Ohio State cares more about winning than anybody in the North. And we're here to tell you they're in the middle.
But I think, right? being in the middle in the North is probably pretty radical. I think if you ran this exercise with everybody in the North and then saw that Ohio State was in the middle, they'd be an outlier. Because
everybody else in the North would be leaning harder towards doing it the right way.
Yeah, I think so.
Save Oregon. I think Oregon would.
Yeah, probably not Oregon. Yeah.
Put Nike shoes on everybody and that's doing it. Yeah. But when people say that like Ohio State's an SEC school in the North, this is where I think they're not. I think Vanderbilt would be like, win at all costs. We don't care. Right? Maybe not Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
But everybody decent in the South, I think, is a minimum of 7. And the best teams in the South, I think, are 9s. And Ohio State's a 5.6.
I think that's probably right. I don't know that Ryan Day. I think the read on Ryan Day here is wrong. I think he would at least be on the plus side of winning. I mean, I don't think he's like a 7 or an 8, but I think he's not on the left side of that spectrum there.
I think like the NIL conversation is part of this. I think at times Ryan Day is like pushing to like, we're trying to win here, right? Aren't we trying to win? Yeah. Like maybe a little less library talk. Like, are we trying to win? Are we trying? Because the thing to him is like, you're going to fire me if I don't beat Alabama and Georgia. So please, let's not get too caught up on, are we doing it the right way? Have you seen those guys?
Yeah. And also like, obviously, quote unquote, the right way is a little hard to define. Like, I think Ryan Day draws a pretty hard line of like, we're not bringing bad people into the program in the name of winning. Or overlooking, maybe, or like not actively going out and seeking bad people, but overlooking character flaws in the name of winning. Whereas I think probably in the SEC, I think they are a little more willing to do that. Coaches in the past have been a little more willing to do that. But yeah, like pushing the envelope NIL wise, like finding edges on the field, finding edges with like your roster bill, like everyone does that. I think you have to do that if you want to try to compete at the highest level in college football. And I don't think like Ryan Day shies away from any of that. Like there's a line. And Ohio State maybe at times goes past it, but I don't think too far. And there are teams that go like the line doesn't exist, right? They just like, pretend like it's not there, and that's not exactly how Ohio State operates. But I don't think Ohio State is like avoiding getting within 1,000 yards of the line either. Like they understand what it takes to be a competitive national championship chasing program, and Ryan Day does too. So I think Ryan Day is at least more like where the fans are with this answer. And I would probably maybe say like a skosh higher than where the fans were on this answer.
I think in the end, the thing you said about like, would you overlook character flaws in a person because they are a great player is really the nut of it. And I think we're hearing from these Ohio State fans that they don't want Ohio State to do that. And I don't think Ryan Day wants to do that either. And I think the proof is in the pudding of like, they've competed at a high level without doing that. And it's again, one of those things of like, if you're not winning, like if you're really losing, like what Ohio State is doing right now under Ryan Day, that's not winning. They are winning.
Yeah.
They're not beating their rival and they're not winning playoff games, but they're winning a ton. So I don't know that Ryan Day or anybody else is like looking at the talent level and saying, man, should we maybe? Whereas, I think there were times in the Jim Tressel era where they did that. And again, you can decide whether you think that's right or wrong, but it was, I think like trying to think like we need to be better on the field. And so like, this is great. And Tressel cared about all that stuff, but I think then was willing at times to maybe make a couple exceptions in the name of like, I'm realistic about this. You got to win. All this other stuff is really important, but in individual cases, you got to win. It's a bigger discussion. Yeah. I was mostly curious where fans would be because I think it does contribute to the day discussion. Other one that I wanted to talk about that contributes to the discussion, why has Ohio State lost these games the last 3 years? I throw out the Missouri loss. Like, do you throw it out?
Yeah. Yeah. Weird
like,
game.
Like the quarterback gets hurt and then whatever. I mean, it was just, it's not great. I think it contributed to the immediate angst in the offseason. It was not great. I don't think you ignore it. But I also don't think it's indicative of something.
Yeah. I agree with that.
You don't get a complete pass because it's like, come on, man, like be more prepared than this. But also the quarterback transferred, the other one got hurt. You didn't have anybody to play. So I really wasn't talking about Missouri. I'm really talking about the 3 Michigan losses, the Georgia playoff loss, and the Oregon regular season loss, which are all very different. And it's difficult to give a singular answer about a group of games that have different reasons. But I said for those losses, rank why Ohio State lost those games. And the 4 options I gave were like, it's more like the coach's fault. It's more the player's fault. It was just bad luck or injuries. What are you going to do? Or the opponent was just good / the opponent maybe had an edge / cheated. So the way the texters ranked them, the number 1 reason Ohio State lost those games, the opponent was good / cheated. 2, the coaches. 3, luck and injuries, which is the kind of thing of like Marvin Harrison Jr., right, takes that hit and can't play against Georgia. 4, the players. So nobody's thinking like Ohio State wasn't talented enough. I actually think there are some indications here where there are times where you could say it's more on the players, I think, than maybe people think, which is like the coaches brought them in and the coaches coached them up and the coaches did or didn't develop them. So it's not like, but there are, I think, are a couple spots in some of these losses where it's like, well, their cornerbacks weren't good enough in the Oregon game. So, again, that might be on the coaches, but also like that was not up to the standard. Like there are things with the defense where it's like, that's not what they should be in 21, not just the coaches. And the quarterback play last year was not to the typical Ohio State standard. So anyway, this idea, coach is second. I'm just trying to get a vibe. What do you think of this list? I think acknowledging the fact that like Georgia's pretty darn good. Michigan's been pretty darn good. / Connor Stallions, I think is worthy. I think that's the correct number 1.
Yeah, probably. I might want to put coaches 1. Like,
okay,
if you combine sort of in-game decision making, if you combine, like, if you go back to 2021, the Oregon loss, like Kerry Combs not figuring out how to stop a crack sweep against Oregon, it's like how many times they have to run it before you figure out how to stop it, kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. Like it's not there. There is not one thing that like kind of colors all of those losses that I think you can point to. I think it is probably right to put the other teams were good. at the top of the list, and obviously the stallion stuff. I would maybe go like 1A, 1B. I don't know. With that and the Ohio State's coaching performances in those games, they have had some tough injury luck for sure. And even if you go back to 2019, like I would put not insignificant portion of that loss on like a failure of execution on the players, like especially like some of the red zone opportunities that they missed out on. Obviously, the interception to end the game. Like there were some player mishaps in that game that cost Ohio State. And otherwise, I thought they were like pretty well prepared and well coached. So it runs the gamut. But I do think the two at the top of this list are definitely the top two reasons I would point to.
So I think it's when I ask that question, it's not just Ryan Day, it's all the coaches. So I do think, I mean, we absolutely would point to that there have been times where
Jim Knowles in 2022, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So reasonable. Just wanted to get a vibe. I wanted to see if like fans would be like, oh, coach is number one. Or like, oh no, it's not the coaches. But I think coaches at number two, or as you said, kind of a 1A, 1B. On that, the other team was good / maybe cheated to get an edge, was a 1.74. Coaches were a 2.3. Luck injuries was a 2.7. And Ohio State players was a 3.3 just in how they voted. So it's like close between the coaches and the luck. But the other team was good / cheated, was like kind of overwhelmingly number one. Yeah. So wanted to cover that. Last thing that we want to talk about with Ryan Day before we get to Whatcha. Is Ryan Day prepared to be a national title head coach? So this to me is different than, am I glad he's the coach right now? Because I think you could think, man, I freaking love this guy. I love him. I'm so glad. He makes me, I am proud to be a Buckeye, and he contributes to that. I love Ryan Day. You think he's ready to coach at a national championship level? I hope he is, but I'm not sure. I think fans could think that, couldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that would be a reasonable thing. So in the end, faith in Ryan Day. How much faith do you have in Ryan Day to do his job as a head coach this season at the highest level and give Ohio State the best chance possible to win the national title? I wanted to make sure this question wasn't like they have to win the national title, but that if they don't, it wouldn't be like, well, Ryan Day blew it. In-game aggression wasn't there. I can't believe they weren't ready to play. Like maybe others, right? That you don't think you'll be feeling that. I want him to, I'm glad he's the head coach. Again, was like an 8.77, 8.34 on faith, 8.34, which is not quite as high as I'm glad he's the head coach, but is still
pretty high.
I think that the vocal group, there's a vocal group of fans that would say Ryan Day can't win the big game. He's an 8.34 out of 10 of I have faith in him to coach at a national championship level.
This is actually more surprising to me than the first answer, because like the first answer is like, do you think he's a good guy? Almost, and it's like, yeah, like I can definitely see that. He does not have a sterling record in big games. In fact, he has quite a bad record in big games, like top 5 teams. So I'm surprised this is this high. Like I would have guessed like honestly, maybe like a 6 or 7.
He's getting the benefit of the doubt right there in the Georgia game. And I think you can look at the Georgia game and really view that as more of a positive than a negative, for sure. Right.
Yes.
There's a lot of stuff that went against them. The Oregon game, it's like, okay, they weren't really prepared defensively, and CJ Stroud was a young quarterback. Okay. Like that's kind of not the case anymore. He made the hire to sort of fix the defensive issues, and they brought in a veteran quarterback for this year. And then the Michigan game, if you are viewing some chunk of the Michigan games as, oh, Michigan had an edge unfairly, that affects your view too. And then you're like, no, I have faith in this guy when these other things aren't happening. And then I think actually the one in the end that's the toughest one is last year, because Jim Harbaugh wasn't there. Michigan had been penalized. Connor Stallions wasn't on the sideline, and Michigan still won. But you could still say, well, the quarterback play wasn't up to now, which Ryan Day certainly has a huge part of. But, like, and I think I will use the word excuses here. If you are feeling good about Ohio State, I think you can make excuses for why they've lost big games and arrive at a pretty high rating here.
Yeah. And I think, and you would probably, they're explanations, right? They're not excuses, but especially when it comes to the Michigan stuff. Which is fair. Like, again, like I said, I don't really know the right way to kind of view that either, or like how to process that as I try to analyze Ryan Day. It does make it rather difficult. And had they let's like just lost in 21 and 22 and then like not and won last year, I probably would almost completely wipe those 2 losses to Michigan away. But they lost last year too, so like that colors it for me a little bit. Like that, I would not have this high of a rating for my faith in Ryan Day to win a big game. I think he can do it. Like I'm not a 0, but I wouldn't be at an 8. I think I'd probably put like a 7.
And I do think in the end, I think that Ohio State has not been at its best in the 3 Michigan games. I think, that's regardless of what else is happening, they weren't as good as you thought they would be, and maybe as good as they had shown during the course of the season up to that point. And so, like, that's a true statement. I don't even think Ryan, I don't know that anybody in that building would disagree with that. Did you play your best in the last 3 Michigan games? No. So, but good for Ohio State fans, believing in your coach. That's a better way to go through life than being like, let's get this guy out of here. All right. That is our full-throated Ryan Day discussion. Feel good about it? Is that what we needed to do?
I do feel good about it. It's always interesting to get the perspective of the fan base in this kind of way because it's not what I would have assumed. So I'm glad we did it.
It's one of those, I think it's good for fans to know what other fans are thinking. And you can talk to your friend and your neighbor and your family member about that, but like a big group of loyal, smart, dedicated, educated Ohio State fans, this is what they're thinking about Ryan Day heading into the season. And then it's just time for ball. But before it's time for ball, it's time for Whatcha Watching, What You Eating, What You Thinking. Bill, what have you been watching?
Can I change it to like what I've been listening to? I've done that before, right? Like make it like a music thing.
Absorbing culture.
I've discovered a new band recently that like I can't get enough of listening to. They are from Australia. They are called the Buoys. It's like spelled like, I think it's pronounced like it's the boys, but it's spelled like the buoys, like in the water.
Oh,
and it's a play on word. It's a play on words because there are no men in the band, which like I think is like actually very funny. But it's just like really good, like kind of punk, maybe like a little more alternative. There's some jangly guitar in there, which I know you love. And they don't have a ton of songs on Spotify. They might have like a dozen. They have like one album that's like 7 or 8 songs, but they're all good, man. It's just like really good music that I happen to like stumble upon randomly. I think via like a YouTube algorithm. There's a YouTube channel that I like. It's a radio station in Australia called Triple J, and they have this thing called Like a Version where they have bands come on and like play one of their songs and then play a cover song. So this band, the Boys, did a cover of an Olivia Rodrigo song of all things. Like I'm not a massive Olivia Rodrigo fan, but like they did a really nice job covering it. So like I'll listen to more. And like now for probably the last like 3 weeks, it's like all I listen to is this band's like dozen or so songs. So if you like that kind of music for as generally as I described it, I would check them out because it's pretty good stuff.
That's a good use of robots, right? You might like this music and it pops in your feed.
Yeah. It's great.
I would just have robots doing that all day. I watched the Moon movie, the Fly Me to the Moon with Channing Tatum.
Yeah.
And Scarlett Johansson. And it's just one of those things, again, like it was out for a couple weeks and we were sort of deciding as a family, like, can we go, whatever. And then it just got wiped out because Twisters came out and Wolverine and Deadpool came out. And it was like, it's gone. We missed it. And then I found it like not at my theater. I had to go to a different theater, but I was like, I'm going to see this movie by myself because it's completely going to be gone in a little bit. It's just a reminder. It's just like, when big summer blockbusters are coming, man, they just absolutely wipe out the entire theaters. It's like, don't you have 20 screens? It's like, yeah, but 17 of them are Deadpool and Wolverine. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So the Moon movie, and like it was, again, I'm here to like apologize again. All I want is like interesting dramas for adults. And then I go see them and I'm like, I kind of wish one of these people would get eaten by a dragon. So it was fine.
It's got decent ratings. It's like almost a 7 on IMDb. It's 65% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's not bad.
It was cute and clever. It was good. Scarlett Johansson was very good. I think Channing Tatum is a little bit of a cinder block head. Like I don't find him particularly compelling, and he didn't show his abs. So it's like, why are you here?
Yeah. You know who I bet showed his abs is my guy in Twisters. But those abs were all over.
Oh yeah. It's like, oh no, the tornado ripped off Glenn Powell's shirt again. And his pants. Oh no. I haven't seen that one yet because we're trying to do that again. It's like both of my children are home right now, but they're incredibly busy. So we're trying to do things as a family, except they want nothing to do with me. So it's like I can't go see things because they might want to go see them if their plans with their friends fall through.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen. Have you seen Twisters yet?
No, I have a 1-year-old. I haven't seen Twisters yet. I want to go see it. Yeah, but I haven't seen it because I love the original one.
Yeah. All right. What are you eating?
Huey Magoo's, man.
Oh yeah, that's mine.
Yeah.
Too. All right.
Yeah. We had a nice lunch at a new chicken finger establishment here in Columbus, which I don't even know where else in the world that it is. I just know that it's new to Columbus, and as a person who likes Raising Cane's and enjoys a Zaxby's when I can find one, after one experience with Huey Magoo's, I might be willing to put them at the top of the list.
That went a long way. I was explaining it to my family, and like your review of their chicken fingers was like, because then we went. Well, we haven't gone because I went with one of my daughters, and like, you carry a lot of weight in the Langley's household, Landis. I'll just tell you that. It's like Bill said this, and like everybody was like, "Oh, okay." But the thing that's good about it, I respect that Cane's focuses and does one thing. But this is tenders. You can get the main meals like tenders and fries and toast, but you can also get wraps. You can also get salads. You can also get things where you get stuff sauced. So the first time you went, you got tenders and I got like buffalo nuggets, whatever. And it's just, they still do the basics very well, but there are more options. So it is quite appealing, and we would recommend it.
I would absolutely recommend it. I would like to go back. I might do it this weekend.
Yeah, I might go tonight. So
maybe I'll do it tonight too.
I'm trying to look up locations, but I just keep getting like I
think there's one we went to the one I guess maybe it's technically like in Powell or Worthington. There's one in Marysville. There's one in Centerville. So I guess there are a few Ohio locations.
Coming. Bell Fountain, one's coming. Circleville, one's coming. So yeah, it feels like they're on the way. They're on the march north, which we respect. So it's nice to have a new chicken place. You know what I'm saying?
It is. Yeah. Very much. And maybe maybe it being here will cause some competition for Cane's. Maybe they'll change some stuff up. You never know.
Yeah. And again, I respect a singular focus, but it's okay to spread out too. So
yeah, I like Cane's. Yeah. Different kind of chicken finger, but it's good. Yeah.
Not quite as crispy as a Chain's finger, but like good and seasoned and flavorful.
Yeah.
All right. What are you thinking about?
So I, like a lot of people, I'm sure, have been tuning into the Olympics. Rugby sevens is the perfect sport. That's what I'm thinking.
That's what I was going to say too. It is. I think we should have international rugby competition the week before college football starts every year.
Yeah.
Is there anything better to get you ready for football practice than an American trucking an Australian and running 95 yards for a game-winning score? It was like, let's go. Amazing.
It's awesome. And like, I know next to nothing about rugby. I played it one time on a beach in Australia with a guy from Tasmania who knocked my clock when I was trying to run the ball. But so I guess like there's rugby union and there's rugby sevens, and the Olympics is rugby sevens. So there's fewer players on the field. The games are shorter, and it's just like incredibly fast paced. I mean, like on the field, just like a lot of speed and as physical as you would hope a rugby match to be. And it flies by because they play like 2 7-minute halves, and that's it. And they play multiple games a day. And it's almost like the 7-on-7 football equivalent, I would imagine, to rugby. And it's awesome. Like I want to watch it every day. It's great.
And it's just the right amount of like physicality. And again, I don't understand it, but all I know is that someone tried to tackle an American. She refused to be tackled, ran them over, and then ran away from everybody else. And it's like, I don't know. That's football.
Yeah. And she ran to a bronze medal of America's first medal in women's rugby, right?
Yeah. So I don't know her name, and she's from Utah. The person who ran for the winning bronze medal, because I felt a little bit guilty about some of the stuff because I'm sort of like retweeting that Northern people are doing things, and then I'm like, well, we're all Americans, aren't we? And I'm like, yeah, but still the North. Yeah. Alex Cedric from Salt Lake City is the person who trucked the Australian and ran for the bronze medal. So I support all Americans at the Olympics. I support Americans from the North a little bit more.
Yeah, a couple on the men's gymnastics team is that medal too, right? I know the guy from Penn State.
3 out of 5.
Yeah.
Two Michigan, and a Penn State. So I'm also keeping track of, if you are from the North and you do an amazing Olympic thing, once the Olympics die down, I want you on this show, like after you're done doing everybody else. After you do the Today Show, you can come on here like in February. So I'm keeping track of Northern Olympians, but Alex Cedric from Utah is on the stinking list. All right.
I'm not, because I'm bad at my job. What is Ohio State's representation like at the Olympics? Do you know?
Oh, they have a lot of they have some good swimmers. Hunter Armstrong is from Ohio State. He swam. And then they have like a lot of Olympic, Kyle Snyder's there, the wrestler, but who he actually trained at Penn State's training facility most recently, even though he wrestled at Ohio State and previously had trained at Ohio State. And then they have like a lot of smaller sport people for like various countries. Like there are, I think, fencers, that are like from competing not for Team USA that came from Ohio State. So like, again, this is one of those things. I know that after the Penn State pommel horse guy like took over the world and helped the men's gymnastics team take a bronze, like someone I saw, at first I saw like Penn State offensive line coach like retweeted it. And then someone tweeted a picture of him like at a Penn State game, like on the field being recognized. And it's like, it is a reminder that the American Olympic movement is propped up by college football. And so when college football teams bring in a ton of money and we disperse that money to help these sports exist, like it's awesome. And it's difficult. And as I keep saying, nobody ever asked football players if they were cool. That's like, hey, we're going to give your money to fencers. Are you good with that? It's like, what? Can I have my money? So we have to figure this out going forward, but it's still in full effect right now. So when the men's gymnastics team has 2 Michigan guys and a Penn State guy taking a bronze medal, that's Michigan football and Penn State football at work. This is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yarostowski, for making us look good and sound good. We have football starting on Thursday. So you can listen to the podcast feed, which is where you are right now, to make sure you're catching Snap Judgments, to make sure you're catching the podcast daily every morning. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming fast and furious. There's going to be a lot of stuff getting texted, 614-662-4509 if you want to try that. And then we're rolling stuff out on Kings of the North. We just welcomed Kansas and Kansas State to the North. We are at 28 Northern teams we'll be talking about this season. So we certainly would invite you to try that. For Mike Yarostowski, for Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of Columbus.